Good morning and welcome to the September board meeting of the MTA. We're going to start with public speakers. Lucille.
Our first speaker is Tramel Thompson.
And I want to address Mr. Larry Swartz today and his comments about people being delusional. There's no one more delusional than Mr. Cuomo. For someone to say that he don't know who run the subways to a few months later saying that he go take charge of the subways, it shows that he's delusional and he just needed that time to create his next set of lies, believe it or not. Delusional is the MTA board who never done our work, but got the nerve to tell the 8 million riders and the 46,000 union members what's good for us. That's pretty delusional. Delusional is you guys talking about cuts in our contract. Those cuts in our contract is going to hurt the ride in public. That's delusional. I don't know what you guys is really thinking here. Another thing is delusional. Mr. Foy, you came from the Bridgegate scandal. According to NewJersey.com, you lied on that Bridgegate scandal. But it makes sense. It makes sense because lies and corruption goes right along with Cuomo agenda. So that's why you're here. Another thing that's delusional is these contract proposals. If you guys think that we're going to take this, like I don't care what Local 100 does. It's a whole bunch of members here that care what's going on here today. If y'all want to take us back, into time and turn us from civil servants to indentured servants, we can hop in our time machine also, and we could take you back to 1966, 1980, or 2005. Whatever y'all want to do. Mr. Foy, you got to do better, man. You listening to Cuomo, we can have all these people at Port Washington because it's coming. You affecting our livelihood, it's a matter of time before we affect yours. And for the record, this is what we think about these contract proposals. We don't care about it. Y'all got to do better. You can't call us miracle workers and then treat us like we slaves.
Please kindly conclude your remarks, please. Thank you.
And there's no physical.
Please kindly conclude your remarks. Thank you.
I claim we don't come to work. I'm at work right now.
Please kindly conclude your remarks. Thank you.
That's a smack in our face.
Sir, please kindly conclude your remarks. Before the next speaker, we have 54 people speaking today. We are asking that everyone abides by the 2-minute limit. Thank you. The next speaker is Jocelyn McCray, followed by Cannella Gomez.
Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is Jocelyn McCray. I'm a member of Local 100 and Progressive Action. Earlier in this meeting, when you guys were discussing safety, you was talking about assaults. I am currently out on workers' comp because I was spit on while doing my job at work. Now, someone said being spit on is worse than being punched in the face. But guess what? I have 2 children at home. So am I supposed to go home with a black eye as well? We need to stop all assaults. I drive a bus in New York City through every single neighborhood. Some are high crime, some aren't. But guess what? A partial partition is not stopping anything. They can still reach over, they can still lean over, and our safety is still at risk. So if you want us to come to work and report to work and be present, then you have to ensure our safety. Stop making cuts and put in the right protection for your employees. It does not take any rocket science to understand that when you come in, just like you guys have security down here, now today y'all called for extra police, and then y'all stop people from coming upstairs. I cannot stop anyone from coming on that bus. It's open to the public. And then y'all want to cut service, so now we're going to have people waiting, people disgruntled. You guys are setting up the perfect storm for the customers and the employees to come and have issues with one another while you sit comfy here in Manhattan not doing anything. All of this is talk. We don't see any of you guys out here riding any bus in the 5 boroughs at all. So if you want to ensure our safety and the rider's safety, then you have to do a better job than just sitting in this meeting talking about month after month what is supposed to happen, and get out there and put in correct safety measures for us. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Cannella Gomez, followed by Kenneth Murray.
You guys are funny. Good morning, everyone. I just want to say that I've never seen a leadership so disenchanted or so far from their employees. Like, you guys really have no understanding of what your employees go through. And for you guys to submit those contracts, then, Mr. Ford, you make almost $400,000 a year. And I would never say that you make too much money. So how can you tell us employees that make less than 80 grand a year to take 2% raise in New York City? That's insane. Do you feel like, imagine someone telling you you can't make more money. Like, it's embarrassing. Like, it's just a shame that you guys just don't understand where we come from. And as far as assaults go, you guys are the main reason we get assaulted. Like, as sure as the sun will rise, when it's our contract time, you guys, I don't know, it's like sometimes I think the Post works for the MTA board. You guys fill the newspaper with, we're lazy, we're taking so many days off. Like, I haven't had a Christmas off in years. I haven't had a Thanksgiving off in years. I haven't had a 4th of July off in years. I haven't had my birthday off in years. Like, it's embarrassing. The only good thing in this room with you MTA board guys is President Byfield. I will say, President Byfield, you are a godsend to the MTA, and we appreciate you. We really appreciate you. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Our next speaker is Kenneth Murray, followed by John Ferretti.
We the transit workers work entirely safe for a dependable service. Knowing this, we the transit workers could not understand why the MTA would offer such a draconian contract. You see, a mass transit system of the 21st century deserves a 21st century training for a 21st century worker with 21st century wages. We the transit workers did not come here today for special treatment, for you would accuse us of wanting. We did not come here for the revolution, for you would accuse us of violence. Let it be written for all to read. When the MTA said yes, we said no. Labor brings in money. Respect labor and give us a fair contract.
Our next speaker is John Ferretti, followed by Rodney Ransom.
Hi, I'm John Ferretti, conductor, proud member of Local 100. I'm here today to talk about what you guys never talk about, where the real crisis of the funding of the transit system comes from. It doesn't come from our overtime. It comes from Wall Street. It comes from salary raises for people like Cuomo. You people have no shame. Every one of you are nothing but a lackey for a gangster governor who's done nothing but attack and lie about working people who make this city run. He gets a $71,000 raise in 2 years. $71,000, 40% raise in 2 years, like a thief in the night. Governor Cuomo and his cronies in the state legislature, they vote themselves a 40% raise. But you won't give us 2? Then you have the nerve, you have the absolute nerve to come here and talk about soft tissue injuries and our employees being injured on the job. Where's Schwartz, by the way? You want to know why we're injured? Because of liars like Larry Schwartz and liars like Patrick Foy. You got $400,000 a year, we can't get 2%? You liar, you got blood on your hands. How dare you come here and talk about you care about us? You're really wringing your hands about how much we're injured. Do you really believe that anybody believes these lies? The time for that nonsense is over. It's over. The riders and the workers are uniting. We're going to show up at every board meeting. You guys can't hide from us. Cuomo can't hide from us. We run this city. We run this city, and don't you ever forget it. And we can make it stop. Don't you ever forget that neither.
Our next speaker is Rodney Ransom, followed by Seth Rosenberg.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone here. To say that I'm outraged or disgusted by the contract demands that you've given us would be a joke. Listening to some of you speak in itself was a joke. I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know what your background is. I don't know where you came from. I don't know who you think you are. But a lot of us are upset and we're tired of it. When we come to work, we get assaulted. We get abused. We got a gentleman here that got stabbed in his back. None of you responded to it. But the minute Cuomo says jump, the first thing you ask is how high? Where's your manhood? Where's your womanhood? Stand up for what's right. We move this city and pay us correctly.
Our next speaker is Seth Rosenberg, followed by Lee Ireland.
Thank you. Some of you seen me before. Let me be perfectly clear. The lies from you and Cuomo about overtime and attendance were done on purpose to try and position yourself to get givebacks from us, from Local 100, on leave time, sick time, and hours of work. You are directly responsible for the rise in assaults on transit workers, and you should be held accountable for your crimes. On attendance, why are we injured and sick so much other than the assaults that you're sicking on us? First, Byford called us miracle workers, and he's right. But you can't have it both ways. Keeping up a system that is falling apart is dangerous. I had to take the same train out of service 3 times in a row, a train that could have injured me. Why is that? As a safety inspector for the union, I saw dangerous and disgusting conditions that when they affected management were fixed like that. But when they affected us, they languished for weeks or months. That gets us sick, that gets us injured. We can't come to work. You cut our schedules and try and squeeze more out of us so we don't have proper recovery time. That leads to stress, that leads to injury, that leads to mistakes. Anyone who works down here can tell you the truth, that you and the MTA don't care about the safety of workers or riders, except to cover your You don't even think of us as human. We are just cogs in your machine to make the service run. But transit workers care about safety. We have to. Unlike you, our lives are on the line. Unlike you, we actually care about working people and their lives, the millions who ride our trains. What the MTA fears is an alliance between transit workers and riders, and it is coming together, right? Transit workers care about safety, and we will enforce safety, protect our lives and the riders. If necessary, we will shut down unsafe work, and that may lead to disruptions. But the public needs to know that since the MTA has abdicated on safety, we will enforce safety. New York City runs and works because we work, and
Please.
never forget that.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Lee Ireland.
My name is Lee Ireland. I've been working for New York City Transit for 35 and a half years. And I'll be 70 years old in January. And I'm so upset at how things have fallen apart. I mean, I never hear anybody talking about the homelessness problem on the trains. Homelessness on our system has become unbelievably unbearable. I don't blame them. I blame management for that because it needs to be addressed by management. You've got to do something about this problem. How can you let people that are homeless take over the system like they do? They're like camping out. I've got so many photos. I take photos just to demonstrate this. Anybody want to see them? I'll show them. You know, I mean, come on. And then think of the riding public that has to endure that. And they're paying their fares. They're paying their legal fares, and that's what they have to endure. How is that right? Nobody wants to talk about that. And the lack of police protection, another thing. You know, back in the early days, there used to be plainclothes detectives out in the field. That was a wonderful thing. What happened to that? We need that. You know, the criminals feel that they don't have nothing to worry about. They're well aware that the fact that there's no police protection out there. And we all know that. We can see it. And they see it. And they've become very brazen. And it's unsafe not only for us as employees, but for the riding public and tourists that come from all over America and abroad. You know, many times I'll press the alert button for conductors to call command center to make them aware of something that's going bad on the subways. Because most people don't do it because they're afraid that then they will be accosted by the by the criminal that's causing the problem. So they're afraid to do it. So I always do it to try to show a good example to passengers how to respond.
Sir,
And then
please
when it goes to
kindly
the
conclude
conductor,
your remarks.
They call command center, and command center says, but signal en route on your horn.
Sir, please
You know,
kindly
and
conclude
the
your
cops
remarks.
Never show up. They never show up. Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Woo!
Our next speaker is Guillermo Rosa, followed by Rick Horan.
What kind of power? Union power.
Let's go.
I'm Deputy County Executive Guillermo Rosa, speaking today on behalf of County Executive Ed Day. It was disappointing to learn that the capital plan, finally released last week, indicates nothing whatsoever for the Pascack Valley line and no specific capital improvements anywhere in the county of Rockland. This is simply unacceptable. Given the well-documented $40 million annual value gap that Rockland County has and has suffered for more than 30 years. We have repeatedly asked Metro North to fund the 2 remaining passing sidings that were never built in the Pascack Valley line. The west of Hudson needs new locomotives. MTA's needs assessment, released in 2013, stated that they will be replaced in 2020 to 2024. If we're ever to have a one seat into Manhattan, we need MTA to provide the funds towards the Gateway Tunnel project and the Bergen Loop. For more than a decade, Rockland County has asked Metro North to fund accessibility improvements as well at the Southern Rail Station. There is no funding for any of these projects in the capital plan, and so we have to ask ourselves why. For the past 16 months alone, Pascack Valley Line commuters have gone without 2 of our 4 express trains, and for years have endured more service delays and cancellations that would ever be allowed on any other metro line. I personally was a commuter for 5 years on the fantastic Hudson line.
Sir, please kindly conclude your remarks.
From Mussing, we shared a 98.9% on-time rate, and that was fantastic. We just can't understand why that can't be the standard on the Pascack Valley line.
Sir, please
Finally,
kindly
I
conclude your
respectfully ask
remarks.
that you vote no today unless improvements to the Pascack line and other projects that benefit Rockland County are included in the plan. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Rick Horan.
I'm Rick Horan, Executive Director of the Coalition for Queens Rail, a 501c3 formed to ensure that the Rockaway Beach branch be reactivated as part of the city subway system. This skinny strip of land, just 60 feet wide by 3.5 miles long, is perhaps the most valuable in the entire city. Once trains run on it again, it will reconnect South Queens with the rest of the borough, and in so doing, bring educational, employment, and recreational opportunities to thousands of residents. But what should be low-hanging fruit as far as transportation projects go has gone seriously off the rails. In March 2016, when the feasibility study was commissioned, you promised a 2017 June release. Then you told us that the scope of the study was expanded to include a one-seat ride to JFK, a consultant was hired, and a new completion date announced of Q1 2018. The good news is that the consultant, Sister Engineering, completed their $863,000 contract on time. The bad news is that you have deliberately and perhaps illegally have sandbagged the study for 1.5 years. Worse, you have issued no public statements as to why it is late, nor offered any reason or new date for its release. So much for transparency, or for that matter, competence. This is irresponsible behavior, and it has very serious consequences. One, it has effectively removed this project from consideration in the current capital planning cycle. Second, every day this project is delayed, thousands of commuters continue to be robbed of valuable time and opportunities. Third, this delay significantly increases carbon emissions from the perpetually congested Woodhaven Boulevard and Van Wyck Expressway. Mr. Foy, the MTA has responsibility to fulfill its promises. South Queens is counting on you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joseph Pollard.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Joseph Pollard. I'm a TW Local 100 member, and I'm a member of New York City Transit. I'm a tire operator. And, you know, our ridership doubled in the past 2 decades. That's to about 5.7 million. And, you know, with the ridership doubling, that means that there's more money coming into New York City. And that means us transit workers, all the ones that's helping these riders get through the city. But yet, your governor, Cuomo, was forced to bail out 3 ski resorts and whatnot, and with our money. But yet now, it's contract time, and guess what? Y'all don't have no money for us. I think that is a bunch of balaki. And, you know, every time it comes around to our contract time, you always say, I don't have the money. But we've been moving this city for quite some time now, and the money is always coming here. Remember, MTA is a monopoly, because there's only one system in this city. So there can't be no way that y'all don't have the money. Y'all just don't want to give us the money that we deserve. And I think TW Local 100 is not going anywhere, and we will be here. And I think it's time for y'all to come out your pockets. Give up that money. Have a good day.
Our next speaker is Jason Panero, followed by Thomas Hill Gardner.
Good morning, MTA full board meeting. I'm Jason Anthony Panero, Regional Communications Strategist for Passengers United, a regional commuter group advocacy that represents commuters that depend on mass transit. This month, I want to speak about transparency. This MTA board has to be more vocal in terms to raise concerns of their constituents. In particular, 2 new board members that are not from the city, that are basically sitting there doing the committees and being quiet. You guys need to be more vocal. Thank you. But a person that has to give a lot of explanation is Patrick Foy. When he was executive director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, under his tenure, in January 2017, he approved the capital plan that covers the years 2017 to 2026, that includes the air train to LaGuardia Airport, that only covers the Port Washington branch, who he happens to live there, and leave us that lives on the east side of Hudson stranded. And also, he has to explain why he has a Twitter handle at Pat Foy with no profile picture and hasn't been updated since July 12th when leader Hector Figueroa passed away. No explanation provided, and we have a governor named Andrew Mark Cuomo that making flip-flops regarding the subway action plan instead of supporting a Andy Byford fast forward plan. The MTA board has lost voices like Chuck Mudler and Mitch Patty due to Andrew Mark Cuomo's flip-flopping. You guys need to be more vocal, especially Wanda Herman. And,
Please kindly conclude your remarks.
Max. I'll conclude my remarks when you guys.
Please kindly conclude your remarks, sir.
I vote to the commuters.
Thank you so much. Please kindly conclude your remarks. Thank you. Our next speaker is Thomas Hill Gardner, followed by Amy Pothenroth.
Hi, Tom Hill Gardner. I'm a Queens resident. I'm a consumer of your subway system and bus services and occasionally your commuter rail lines. And I'm here today It's kind of along the same theme of a lot of things that people are speaking about here about the big lie. Joseph Goebbels once said, if you tell a lie once, it remains a lie. If you tell a lie 1,000 times, it becomes the truth. Now, I'm 15 years late coming here because you've been telling this lie for 15 years. And what I'm talking about is when I'm on the subway every day, I hear this announcement. It says, backpacks and other large containers are subject to a random search by the police. Now, that's not true. That's unconstitutional. There's no random search. What you're allowed to do is the police are allowed to be at the station and stop people randomly who come in with backpacks and large containers, and they may randomly offer them. You either subject yourself to a search or you decline services. You step out of the station. But there's no random backpack searches by the police. But this is what you tell people. Now, you know, this country is teetering on the brink of fascism, and you got to let people know their rights. And when you continue to give disinformation to the public about what their rights are, you're being part of the big lie. And I gather this is not the only lie you guys have been telling, if I've been hearing things here today. And I'm in solidarity, commuters in solidarity with organized labor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Amy Poffenroth, followed by Ed Markunas.
Good morning. I'm speaking about the acquisition of the Suffern Station. The Suffern Rail Station was built in 1941. The stairways, also built in 1941 to enable passengers to access the rail platforms on both sides of the tracks, are in disrepair. A 1901 overpass connects a walkway between the rail station and a municipal parking lot. Except for an overhang constructed in the mid-1990s to shelter passengers from the weather on the platform and upgrades to bathroom facilities, the Suffern Station reflects that it is a pre-World War II, post-Depression era rail station. It is important to note when the rail station was built in 1941, the Tappan Zee Bridge, now replaced by Governor Mario M. Cuomo Bridge, did not yet exist. The Suffern Station was built in 1941 to reflect the needs of a rural rail community. The Suffern Station is not handicapped accessible, so equal access to passenger service does not exist for residents and travelers with disabilities. The condition of the rail station parking lot is in great disrepair, and the village has been unable to secure assistance from New Jersey Transit for needed improvements. The pavement has degraded to the point that rough rock mixed with asphalt is all that remains. The parking lot is dangerous for people to walk on, especially for those who wear shoes with heels and passengers who need walking assistance. A retaining wall on the property is rotted and ready to give way. A large tree had to be removed so customers could get into their car without swiping branches. Lighting on the rail lot is inadequate, as well as the walkways. These are a sample of the issues that Suffern faces. It's not an exhaustive list. Suffern is experiencing a renaissance. TOD projects offer for opportunities for commuters to have a rail station within their steps. However, as commuters roll up to the Suffern Station, they are not provided a welcoming first impression.
Thank you so much for your comment.
The Village of Suffern seeks the acquisition of the Suffern Station for travelers and commuters.
Please kindly
so that our New
conclude
York
your
Rail
remarks.
Station can welcome residents to the Village of Suffern. And
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Ed Markunas, followed by Ellen Shannon.
Good morning. My name is Ed Markunas. I am the mayor of the Village of Suffern in Rockland County, New York. I would like to urge the MTA board today to pursue the possibilities of obtaining or acquiring the New Jersey Transit-owned station at Suffern, due to some of the mere facts that Ms. Poffenroth just stated. New Jersey Transit Suffern Station is the only asset New Jersey Transit owns in New York. And that's a limitation to the Village of Suffern, which resides in the state of New York. Suffern is actively seeking to bring people and businesses to the downtown areas in proximity to the rail station, which would increase ridership, which we have already seen throughout transit-oriented districts that we have developed throughout the village. This is encouraging for economic development and growth and residential activities such as walking, biking, hiking, commuting, shopping. The TOD regulations, development zone, and the developing new regulations to extend this concept in the village of Suffern, as well as in walking distance, once again, to the train station and the bus depots. The TOD regulations provide for residential and commercial developments of mixed-use options, and these actions have been taken to facilitate the movement of people downtown and expand residential and commercial opportunities near the rail station, which once again increases ridership. Zoning is being modified throughout the village to require new amenities to attract residents at the rail station, including creative outside dining in both for street and backyard dining areas, creation of rooftop dining spaces in both street and backyard areas also. This will only help the MTA and the ridership capabilities in the village of Suffern. A key component to having ready access to affordable transit and jobs and hubs to enhance the density and development near transit stations support the growth of downtown. So I encourage the board today to seek the possibility of acquiring the Suffern Rail Station from New Jersey Transit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Ellen Shannon, followed by Lisa Daglian.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Shannon. I'm speaking on behalf of the Metro North Commuter Council. I spoke on Monday about the Suffern, New York station and how it's an aberration as it's owned by New Jersey Transit. We support our New Jersey Transit colleagues as they work to have their system come back, but we're all aware that they were stripped of much of their financial resources over many years, and it's hard enough for them to keep their own stations within their boundaries working well. To expect them to want to maintain this active safety liability is hard to believe. The parking lot is not finished. It's covered with what happens in New York when they strip the road, and then the next day in New York, we cover it back with a smooth surface, but it doesn't have that smooth surface. It's very dangerous to walk on. And the pathways, as you heard earlier, also would not make me feel safe leaving the station when it's dark or other times. Suffern Station needs to be made accessible. It's unreasonable that riders have to go 30 minutes out of their way to the north, and then come south for New York City. Stations are gateways to our towns and our villages. Yesterday, I was up in Suffern to see what Mayor Ed Marcunas and his staff and the Suffern community is doing is absolutely remarkable. They're turning Suffern into a thriving economic hotspot with transit-oriented development, diverse and really delicious restaurants, a comedy club, a historic theater that's being revived. And on top of that, the film industry has now taken an interest in it, so it's getting national exposure because it's such a stunning place and community. That's why the station should be made an asset and a place of pride.
Thank you so
much. Not a safety-ridden embarrassment that is currently.
Please kindly conclude your
It's time for New York
remarks.
State via the MTA to take on this station and take it over. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lisa Daglian, followed by H.P. Schroer.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lisa Dagley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. We're excited about the FY 2024 Capital Plan's potential to transform the rider experience and improve the system, including long-awaited accessibility projects. The infusion of congestion pricing funds is a true game changer. At the same time, we have concerns about transparency, capacity, and doability. The plan was released less than a week before the vote. How are board members and the public supposed to understand a more than $50 billion plan in a matter of days? Making the information available in an open data format would allow us to do a deep dive. Also missing is the basic information that defines the work, year by year, element by element, and by expected expenditures. When can we see that? A dashboard that everyday people can read showing the original cost, timeline, and capital plan for projects is also critical. How does this all jibe with the forensic audit and transformation plan? This is a big budget to pass if the rules are all going to change. For the capital plan to succeed, the MTA must have the right organizational structure. From what we understand, Capital Construction will oversee the bulk of the work using design-build, greatly expanding its portfolio. At the same time, the July financial plan shows that by the end of 2019, it will have 18 positions below the adopted budget, with staffing levels projected to remain static through 2023. Who will do the work and manage the projects? What's the plan for getting project managers on board quickly? Who will provide oversight to the many contractors that will need to be brought in? Having enough contractors willing to do the work with the MTA is also a major issue. The debarment rules as written will cause well-respected and experienced firms to look elsewhere for work. The MTA should want more bidders, not less, to create healthy competition and realize economic benefits. As you contemplate changes to the rules, we urge you to balance their significant concerns with the need for accountability and responsibility. The riders deserve and need this system that the capital plan promises, and we hope you'll address our concerns quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is H.P. Schroer.
Good morning. My name is H.P. Schroer, Director of You and Me, and a veteran of World War II. I want to thank this board, and in particular Pat Foy, Larry Schwartz, Andy Byford, and David Jones, for thanking veterans for their service by taking action. With help from veterans in CUNY colleges, other veterans groups, the City Council and Mayor agreed to provide veterans enrolled in college the ability to purchase a discounted MetroCard. Because the eligibility requirements changed, the program was postponed and poorly implemented. Since 95% of veterans are not in college, and those that are lose the discount when graduating, we are concentrating on passing 2 state bills, which will provide the money, not come from the MTA budget, and be used to honor veterans by dedicating from every fare collected our suggested 2 cents. When we started, there were 24 legislators. We now have over 80. Although we have a majority, the sponsors failed to put it up for a vote. To address this, Pat Foy and I are scheduled to meet Cuomo's Deputy of Transportation. My goal is for the governor to announce on Veterans Day his approval of a veterans discount. To some, this may be unrealistic, but with your help, it is not. I and my fellow veterans want to thank you for the first time in over 100 years, recognizing our sacrifice is worth 2 cents, and stop charging us full fare by helping us pass the state bills. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Our next speaker is Charles Munoz.
My name is Charles Munoz. I'm a cleaner for the MTA and a member of TW Local 100. It's contract negotiating time, and Governor Cuomo, who just gave himself a 40% raise, and this board, whose members earn 5 times more than the average transit worker, has gone to great lengths to slander transit workers to the media. Here are some examples. IG Carolyn Picorni, who posed for the media holding an Ethernet wire and accused my colleagues of sabotaging biometric clocks. When it was proven no one tampered with the clocks, it was quietly swept under the rug and without a public apology. Larry Schwartz, a person who is out of touch, who engaged in character assassination when he alleged that MTA workers were criminals for working overtime, which angered the public and has contributed to assaults. But he doesn't tell anybody that even though ridership is down 8.5%, it's still up 55% since 1993, while the number of employees has virtually remained the same since then. Mr. Schwartz is also the person who conceded that he wasn't familiar with how fares are collected on city buses, and is a person who routinely fails to submit financial disclosure forms. Pat Foy, a man with a reported wealth of $11.8 million, who has the audacity to say that overtime costs are high because the average MTA employee works about 200 days a year, a figure he claims has consistently treaded down over the past decade. But he has not yet provided any evidence showing a decrease in worker availability in recent years. Let me remind Mr. Foy, MTA spokesman Shams Tariq told the New York Post it is cheaper to pay an existing employee overtime than to hire another person for the same work. Question, would Mr. Foy or Mr. Schwartz prefer transit employees stop working overtime? If yes, I dare them to say it right now. I challenge anyone on this board to trade places with myself and my coworkers. You can bet you guys will run home crying because it takes a special tough person to deal with stations that can reach 130 degrees, rudeness, threats, assault, sick passengers, criminals, the homeless, human waste, garbage, vermin, asbestos, silica, steel dust, etc. This board continues to insult the hardworking folks of this system, but the 40,000 transit workers who moved to the city will not sit
Thank you
back
so much,
and
sir.
be punching bags. So cut the bull and show us the respect
Please
we
kindly
deserve and give us
conclude
the
your
contract
remarks.
that we deserve as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Adonis Rodriguez.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your leadership running the largest transportation system in the whole country. Thank you to the riders and all transportation advocates. You are the one that make board members, elected officials accountable. Keep doing the job. Transportation system has been in a crisis. This crisis didn't happen overnight. This crisis happened because for decades we have not been paying attention to bring a strong leadership to the MTA and make them accountable. So let's do it together. Today I call the MTA to pay a debt we had to the underserved immigrants and working class communities, where we had deplorable train stations such as the one at 3rd Avenue and 149, 242nd and Broadway, close to one of the largest parks without elevators, Van Collen Park. I'm also calling to stop the proposed plan to cut services. Riders are still feeling the cut that we made in 2009. So let's stop those cuts. In order to stop the cut, I also called in the state and the city to add emergency funding right now. Since the MTA is also counting with federal funding to expand the 2nd Avenue subway to 125th, we need to ask President Trump to expand that commitment of funding to bring the train station to the South Bronx, where we have the poorest congressional districts in the nation and some of the worst mining stations there. I also would like to add my voice for the workers of the TW. They deserve a fair contract. It is time, again, to bring them to the table to continue those negotiations in order for the men and women that maintain our train to have a decent contract. So, again, thank you, everyone. I feel that this is a great capital plan. However, this is not enough. Congestion price is a good permanent revenue, source of revenue, but we need to go back to also include a larger contribution to the wealthy New Yorkers so that the MTA should have more funding, and the MTA, we also expect for you to be more transparent on how you spend every single dollar. Gracias a todos. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kevin Xing.
Hello, good morning to Andy Byford. I want to mention about the 14th Street 7th Avenue station on the 1, 2, and 3 trains for station renewal, but the 14th Street 6th Avenue on the F, L, and M trains needs to be station renovations, including 14th Street 7th Avenue station and transfer connections from 14th Street 7th Avenue station to the L train at 14th Street 6th Avenue station renovations as well. 14th Street 6th Avenue on the F, L, and M trains, and 14th Street 7th Avenue on the 1, 2, and 3 trains. We're also having ADA accessible stations, including station renewal as well. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Joanne Jaworski, followed by Sasha Blair Goldenson.
Hello. My name is Joanne Jaworski. I'm a conductor on the subway, have been for a few years now, and I'd like to discuss assaults with you. Unfortunately, transit says assaults and are safe against employees and employee safety and passenger safety is extremely important. Unfortunately, in my personal experience, I have been assaulted numerous times, sexually assaulted, having passengers this is going to make many of you very uncomfortable, pull out their start in front of me. When I call control, their response is signal en route for police. When I hold the passenger that spit in my face for police, what do the police do? The police safely escort him out of the station. This last time, I had a passenger sexually assault me at Marcy Avenue. Stood there at my window. When following week, this same passenger is laying on the train, fully exposed. Called and reported it to control. We're told, signal en route, maybe we'll have a police meet your train. When the conductor with that train got to Essex Street and called control yet again and asked, well, are we holding for police? They're told, no, it's fine, signal en route. Well, I was on the following train. When my train got back to Parsons, that conductor was going out of Parsons again with that same passenger still exposed. Known sexual predator. How are you concerned about the safety of the passengers and employees if you're allowing this person to travel down the road yet again? My complaints to my union, I was told, because I was very upset. I called control. Please don't send this known sexual predator down the road yet again. I was told stay off the radio. When I complained to my union tells me that's fine. They did what they were supposed to do. Why are you
Please
upset?
kindly conclude. Thank you.
I feel transit does not give a about employees or passenger safety.
Thank you. Thank you. This now concludes the public session.
Thank you, Lucille. I'm going to start with a couple of brief remarks, and then Jano Lieber and I are going to go through the presentation on the proposed 2020 to 2024 capital plan. The historic proposed 2020 to 24 capital plan released last week, which if approved would revitalize and modernize public transportation in New York City, is a result of the governor's leadership on MTA capital plan issues. We'll be discussing the proposed program in a few minutes, but I wanted to make a few key points now. The capital plan of a public agency like the MTA is a concrete manifestation of the agency's vision and objectives. Using scarce taxpayer and customer dollars, the proposed $51.5 billion, that excludes Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, the proposed $51.5 billion MTA capital plan looks forward to a region with dramatically greater accessibility across the MTA system, more reliability and more service on subways, buses, and commuter rail, environmental sustainability and resiliency, safety and security across the system, job creation across every region of New York State, and attaining the governor's highest in the nation MWBE goals. This proposed capital plan will enable the MTA to fulfill every element of that vision. The capital plan has come together thanks to the leadership and partnership of the governor, the speaker, and the Senate Majority Leader and their colleagues through the passage last year of $25 billion in new revenue sources in the last legislative session, and thanks to the support of the city and the mayor as well. I received a letter this morning from the mayor outlining the city and the MTA and the state's shared priorities, that New Yorkers need reliable public transit, and shared agreement on the fact that the MTA needs significant resources to deliver on that. The letter notes, and I quote, based on the city's preliminary review of the proposed capital plan, the outlined investments appear to align with the same investments in the 10-point plan released by the governor and the mayor in February 2019 and in the enacted state budget. It is appropriate that New York City contribute to the 2020-24 capital plan. As we determine the size and nature of the contribution, we intend to secure conditions to advance the needs of transit riders and taxpayers. Last sentence, New York City stands ready to contribute to an MTA capital plan as it has done in the past. We look forward to continuing the conversation with the city in the weeks ahead. While a fully funded capital plan would invest a tremendous amount of resources into our transportation system, I want to make it clear that much of those funds we receive from the Central Business District tolling or other revenues are lockbox for capital projects. Without new funding sources for operations or cost cuts, we will continue to face significant financial constraints with forecasted deficits in future years. We're continuing to focus on our operating budget deficits and to find ways to reduce costs and balance the budget as statutorily required each year as we work towards the November financial plan. In the meantime, as we think about building and investing in the future of the system, I also want to acknowledge the hard work of the men and women of this agency continue to do every day. Key performance metrics at every agency continue to improve. In August, with subway on-time performance reaching 84%, and we thank the entire New York City team for helping continue to deliver strong service. And I commend the teams at Metro North and Long Island Railroad as well for strong August performance on both railroads at 93% and 92% respectively. And now on to the new capital plan. All right, so I'm going to do a couple of pages and turn it over to Janet Lieber. This is the largest ever capital plan by far, 70% larger than the 2015 to 2019 program, making unprecedented investments in the region. Unprecedented investment, as I mentioned, of $51.5 billion, revitalizing the system and building on the successful investment of the Subway Action Plan, but investing in Metro North and Long Island Railroad at unprecedented levels. Includes more than $40 billion for New York City Transit, which is more than the entire MTA 2015 to 2019 program. Jano will talk later about the major benefits. MTA Capital Plan process is guided by state law. Public Authorities Law provides for the MTA's 5-year plan to be submitted to the Capital Plan Review Board on or before October 1st of the year before it starts. And assuming the board approves today, that's what we intend to do. The CPRB, by law, has 90 days to review, veto, request changes, or approve. Failure to act is otherwise deemed approval. Not news to anybody in the room, New York depends on public transportation. 2 billion users of the system each year, the largest and busiest transportation network in New York City. 7,300 jobs created in New York State for every $1 billion invested in the MTA Capital Plan. The other investments drive the New York economy. 89% of capital investments for the MTA program are sourced or performed in New York State. If you look at the map to the left, literally every region of the state benefits from the MTA Capital Plan. And that's to the tune, if you look at the upper right, of 350,000 jobs estimated to be created over the 5 years in every corner of New York State. $1 billion of capital projects awarded to New York State certified MWBE-owned enterprises since 2015. MTA is closest to Governor Cuomo's 30% MWBE goal under Michael Gardner's leadership and his team. Region changing quickly, growing, new jobs being created, all good things, but creates additional demands on mass transit. In the past, investments in New York City, in New York's transportation system has not come up. One of the consequences of that is the fact at the bottom, which is traffic congestion costs the region in excess of $20 billion every year. Customers feel the effects of underinvestment. 6 subway lines operating at or above passenger load capacity in the AM peak. Over $300 million annual cost of lost work time due to subway delays. Rising to the challenge, the successful Subway Action Plan targeted root causes of subway delays to arrest the decline of the subway system. Those lessons are being institutionalized to modernize each of the agencies. On-time performance box at the bottom, good on-time performance, dramatically improved at subways, terrific performance, and improving at Long Island Railroad and Metro North as well. Time to reinvest, as I mentioned, under the leadership of the governor, the speaker, and the Senate Majority Leader and their colleagues in the legislature. Passage of $25 billion of new revenues, central business district tolling, elimination of an internet tax advantage, and progressive tax on high-end real estate in New York City. Those 3 revenue sources by law dedicated to 80% to New York City Transit, 10% to the Long Island Railroad, 10% to Metro North. MTA transformation plan set forth in state law, providing for a complete restructuring of the organization to simplify a complex and inefficient organization and to make it more customer-focused and cost-effective. And lastly, before I turn it over to Jano, the capital program forensic audit is underway by state law. The forensic audit is due by December 31st of this year. The firm doing the work has assured us that they will make that goal. We are committing to accelerating the work product on the forensic audit and recommendations and findings from the forensic audit will be incorporated into the 2020 capital plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jano.
Thank you, Pat. First off, I think it bears emphasis that the transformation that Pat referred to is more than just redrawing the boxes. It draws on the cost containment agenda that this board developed and that we've been trying to implement, empowering project CEOs, giving both the power and the accountability to people who are responsible for driving projects so that they can get the job done and not be subject to design changes, scope creep, late-breaking changes that can delay projects and increase costs. Better coordination with track outages. We must have a single strategy for every time we get a track outage, we've got to get maximum amount of work done. I really credit the Transit Authority under Andy's leadership and working with Tim Mulligan that we've made tremendous progress through the Subway Action Plan in doing that. That is part of the transformation itself. We have a whole agenda of making our work much more attractive to contractors, to increase competition, and to lower the pricing, eliminate the premium that many contractors put on MTA work. We have to pay our contractors faster. If you don't pay a contractor on time, you're making him or her your lender, and they will charge you for it. We must do that. We are going to eliminate over-customization. Each of the agencies is taking a look at their specifications to ensure that we are using off-the-shelf products and modular design wherever possible, rather than some specific, very customized product or component. And we also have to have more and more, through the use of design build, more and more emphasis on performance-based specifications rather than over specifying and creating something which is challenging both to fabricate and to install. And we have to take advantage of design build, as I said, and to maximize competition in the marketplace, and there's an enormous amount of work to be done on that. That is as much part of the transformation as the consolidation of many of our back office functions and of our construction functions agency-wide. But here's what New Yorkers are going to get from this new capital plan: more service, reduced crowding, accelerating the program of installing accessibility. We've heard it for years. The governor and everybody who has been involved in preparing this capital program have made it a priority. More stations accessible, more and faster re-signaling of the entire system. This is obviously as much a capacity issue and a customer service issue, but we also, to protect New York's future, have to make sure that we can get more to our existing system. We've got 6 lines, and we're going to be emphasizing re-signaling to grow capacity and reliability. And we need also to continue the process of reaching into parts of the region that do not have mass transit service, so everybody who lives there can participate fully in our economy, in education, and otherwise, and make everything more sustainable and more environmentally coherent. The challenges faced by the transit system, sitting next to Andy Byford, so I'm not going to try to do anything too poetic on. Andy has really articulated these tremendously well. But what are we seeing that we have to respond to? A significant increase in subway ridership that was not met by an increase in investment in the past. Signal system and power and other core infrastructure which is antiquated. We've talked about that again and again. And also the fact that 75% of our stations, even 30 plus years after ADA, are not currently accessible for those with disabilities. And we have to deal with the fact that our subway car fleet is over age, breaks down more frequently than it ought to, and the investments need to be made to address that. So what do we get? Investments that address each of those core issues. Re-signaling 6 lines, not 5, 6 lines, including the Lexington Avenue line, which carries as many people every day as the Boston and Chicago systems combined. Subway cars, 1,900 new subway cars, which is essential to re-signaling because you need the cars that are equipped with the technology to speak to the modern signals, but also to improve performance and reduce breakdowns. Station accessibility, 70 stations. People talked about 50, which was greeted as a great vision, but this has 70 stations being made accessible in the next 5 years. Will be result in 60% of our passengers using stations that are ADA accessible. Station improvements, not just the ADA accessibility, but significant improvements at stations, including that we're going to be replacing 65 escalators and 78 escalators, which are themselves beyond their useful life and really need to be upgraded. Second Avenue Subway, it is time, and I keep saying it, but I'm going to say it again, it's time we make good on the commitment, which dates back to the 1940s, to make the community in East Harlem and Central Harlem equipped with mass transit as the most car-dependent community in New York City in terms of car-dependent, mass transit-dependent community in the city based on the rates of car ownership. We have to make good on that commitment. The bus system, we've obviously increased the focus on buses in part because they are the 100% accessible part of the system. As we make the subway system more accessible, moving towards full accessibility, we must make sure that the bus system does its part to increase access. We have in the capital plan that's being proposed $3.5 billion for the bus system, which calls for, among other things, 2,400 buses to be acquired over the course of this program, moving us towards an all-electric bus fleet in the 2040 range, but in the meantime, putting us on a path to a truly low emissions fleet with more, as well as 500 all-electric buses, also CNG buses, hybrid buses, and creating the environmental sustainability. And many other investments in the bus system, both to complement the move towards electricity, to improve maintenance, and to improve customer service by having digital screens in all the buses as well that can be communicated with real time. The Long Island Railroad, significant increase in ridership, but its ridership, I would say, has also been constrained because we can't provide reverse peak service in any meaningful degree. Metro North has grown reverse peak service tremendously in recent years. Long Island Railroad has not been able to because of their capacity constraints. And they have, as detailed in Phil's LIRR forward system, document, aging system which has component issues not too dissimilar from those we talk about on the subway system. What are we doing about it? Huge investment in those state of good repair for core components like switches, track circuits, grade crossing equipment. Each of those is a major factor in contributing to delays, and we're attacking that aggressively with huge investments. Major new rolling stock investments, which will, among other things, deal with the problem of short trains and overcrowded trains as a result, which is a big problem for the Long Island Railroad system, and also allow us to grow service when East Side Access comes online. Major investment in track that's going to bring us to 90% track state of good repair, and station improvements, including moving the station accessibility profile of the Long Island Railroad to a point where 97% of customers will be using accessible station. And not to be forgotten, the two major projects, East Side Access and Long Island Railroad mainline expansion, which are together enabling a 45% peak hour increase in Long Island Railroad service, and also for the first time, meaningful reverse peak service, which is going to be a great boon for the Long Island Railroad economy as they compete for talent and jobs in Long Island. Metro North is facing some of these same constraints, but it has a particular problem, not just because ridership is growing and because core components are aging, but also because it is so dependent on the network of the Grand Central train shed, the tunnels, and the viaduct going up through Harlem, which are 100 years old and really need some investment. So we are planning, as part of this program, a $900 million investment in that network, the train shed, the Park Avenue tunnel and viaduct. It carries 83% of Metro North's customers, and we are going to start to aggressively attack a problem that's been in the making for some time, but which has been closely monitored. I want to be very clear. So we have a strategy for biting it off in a methodical way. We're going to grow the rolling stock so that Metro North can continue to address the growing ridership. We're going to invest in station accessibility also in the Metro North system. And we are going to make a major capacity and network investment in the form of Penn Access, which will give people in the East Bronx who now have virtually no access to rail transit an opportunity to take direct service both inbound to Manhattan, but also to connect with jobs in Westchester and Connecticut, which has become a big piece of the Metro North system, serving people who want to go to jobs in the northern suburbs and participate economically that way. But not to be forgotten, we're setting the stage for the Harlem line to be third track, so some of the benefits of that capacity growth can take place on that line, which is now capacity constrained north of Crestwood, and also to start to make major investments in the west of Hudson system, which people have been talking about for quite some time. Finally, bridges and tunnels, which is not technically part of the $51.5 billion, but which is such an important piece of our overall regional transit system. First and foremost, getting the central business district tolling infrastructure done and delivering it, investing in all of the core assets of bridges and tunnels. We've talked about each of those, but each of them needs some significant upgrades, both safety and capacity, and they're going to get it under this program. I think everybody knows the significant investments in each of the components, but I just want to close by saying, before I turn it back to Pat, I think that we need to say we are changing how we're doing business. And I just want to emphasize, when this new organization is formed, we are going to be doing all of these capital programs a little bit differently. We're going to be using design build. We're going to be bundling projects so that instead of 1,400 separate projects being designed and then procured, and then we have to get CMs to come to them, we're going to be reducing the number of projects so that we can manage them and implement them more effectively and more efficiently. So with that, Pat, back to you.
Thanks, Jenna. So funding the capital plan, $25 billion in capital for the MTA Capital Plan generated from the three revenue sources passed in the state budget in the past session. Central Business District tolling, $15 billion, two new revenue sources, progressive tax on high-end real estate in New York City, and second, elimination of the internet tax advantage in New York City, a total of $25 billion. By law, those proceeds are allocated 80% to New York City Transit and Bus, 10% to Long Island Railroad and Metro North. Second is the plan assumes federal funding of slightly under $11 billion. The bulk of that is federal formula funding. Formulas are set forth in law and regulation, and flex funding, which is primarily CMAQ, a federal environmental program, the funding of which is directed towards the state. Those two account for $7.8 billion, and we've assumed federal new starts, which is U.S. DOT competitive grant program, for Phase 2 of 2nd Avenue Subway at slightly under $3 billion. We've also assumed $3 billion in capital from New York State and $3 billion from New York City. Governor Cuomo has indicated that he's supportive of the $3 billion from the state, but notes that that will occur in the state legislative session and will be dependent on the views of the Speaker, the Senate Majority Leader, and their colleagues. And I've previously mentioned the letter that Mayor de Blasio sent in today indicating his support for funding for the MTA Capital Plan. Next piece is slightly under $10 billion of MTA bonding and PAYGO. Frankly, most of it will be MTA bonding. And Bridge and Tunnels, Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority is self-funding, and that's $3 billion. The bridge and tunnel amounts are not subject to the capital plan review process, but we're disclosing them in exactly the same way, although the CPRB does not have to vote on them. That in total is $51.5 billion for the CPRB capital program and 3.3, slightly over 3.3 for bridges and tunnels. Lastly, assuming, and I'm going to open it up to board discussion in just a second, assuming board approval today, which I'm not taking for granted because I know there's going to be a robust discussion, the next step would be to file with the CPRB prior to October 1st. There will be briefings of state, city, and legislative partners and local officials, and plenty of time for public input, and prepare for the capital plan review board submission and review process. And with that, I open it up to the board. Start with Dr. Metzger.
As many of my fellow board members know, I've been under intense pressure to vote no on this plan because the Port Jervis Midpoint Yard is not included as funded in this plan. I understand that holding my vote is a tactic that can be successful. First, I want to tell you what I think is really good in this plan. Foremost, this plan is the beginning of appropriate funding level for MTA as a whole. At the last plan, and I've been around for 3 of these plans, at the last plan, which was 32 or so million, the board members amongst themselves and said publicly, this should be 40 or 50 billion dollars. Yeah, I keep having troubles with the M's and the B's. This plan, 5 years later, does provide $51 billion, and that's good. But it's 5 years later, and we've had 5 years more wear and tear, and we've had increased federal mandates, but still it's better than it was. Metro North Railroad has $4.7 billion in this plan, and that compares to $2.5 in the last plan. That's also a good thing, but it doesn't by far cover all of Metro North's needs to meet state of good repair, and I suspect you're going to hear more about that later. Second, the discrepancy between Long Island Railroad and MNR, Metro North, is $1 billion. That is actually smaller than it has been in the past. Neil presented those figures on Monday. On Monday, I said $1 billion discrepancy between railroads is my tipping point, and it is my tipping point in view of the small ask that the west of Hudson has made on this system. People come here and talk to us and say they don't want to wait an hour for a train. I have 13 trains from 4 in the morning, 4:30, well, no, 5 after, until 9:30 at night. 13 trains. We have wait times of 2 hours. And the reason for that is that we can't put more trains on the line without passing sidings and a midpoint yard. We're infrastructure starved. Without money in this plan, we're going to wait another 10 years to get that infrastructure. I checked my birth certificate. That's past my expiration date, so we need it in this plan. Further, it's long been known that Orange and Rockland counties provide MTA with more money, more funding than we get back in services. We pay more than we get in return. This is a value gap that's been true for decades, well, as long as we've been part of it. And we can't get more service. You can't provide us with any more service if we don't have a rail yard. Is it any wonder I'm getting strong-armed? People are fed up with this. The MTA has systematically disregarded the west of Hudson counties of Orange and Rockland. They have not taken our transit needs into consideration. You heard about the Suffern train station today. The Suffern train station is the entry point to New York on the Port Jervis line. And it's incredible to me that it is owned by New Jersey Transit. And on top of all this, Albany only gives us a quarter vote. That's nuts.
You get a half right now.
Yeah, that's only because 2 of our compatriots aren't here. Also, I want to say that this plan, and it's been pointed out by many advocacy groups, this plan was conceived in the dark. The transparency that this board has worked for over many years has gone dark. The board didn't see the details, the full board didn't see the details until Thursday. That's way too late to have discussions with management. Further, there really isn't enough detail in the public documents to let me know what I'm really getting out of the Port Jervis Line capital expansion potential. Lack of detail is another way to avoid transparency. Now, I want to say that there is no rift between Metro North and Long Island Railroad or between Kevin and me. We support each other. We're sister railroads. We're all part of one system. Bless you. I pointed out the billion-dollar discrepancy because it highlights the stupidity of holding back $65 million for a midpoint yard on west of Hudson, which is, bless you again, truly needed west of Hudson. Now, the chairman told me that he's been working to include funding for the midpoint yard, and that he believes it can be forthcoming in some amended plan. That's not entirely satisfying. It should have been in this plan, not something that has to be fought out. Nonetheless, I will take him at his word and expect that he will stand by it. When I was first appointed to the MTA, I was told that my perspective had to be both on my constituents and the MTA as a whole. The region needs this MTA and needs this capital plan. Metro North needs this money and more to be state of good repair. I believe that MTA provides transit for the region, and that includes my people who are being disregarded. Nonetheless, I will vote for the plan.
I'm going to provide a somewhat different perspective. There's fabulous things in this plan, something almost for everybody, and now maybe even for west of Hudson, if the chairman is accurate. But there's a tremendous dichotomy going on here, which I cannot believe I'm the only one that noticed. We're going to have the most fabulous new signals, the most fabulous new rolling stock, accessibility for all, but it's going to be running less frequently because we don't have dedicated funds for operating. And that's just crazy. All of the things Jana was just saying said providing for more and better service, and yet we're faced with the possibility of service cuts. We around this table need to be advocating for a dedicated stream of operating funds, whether it's 2 cents a gallon gas tax, which nobody would feel, somebody else raised a minor percentage on hotel occupancy tax. We need dedicated operating funds so that we can give New Yorkers, and that's all of us, from Poughkeepsie to Tottenville to Montauk, and yes, the service that they require and they need, which will then provide economic benefits for the region. Obviously, I do not have a vote on this, but I just hope everybody's considering the fact that we're going to have great things if this is passed, but we're going to have them less frequently.
Veronica, and then Roger.
When this capital program was released, a number of people would come over to me and say, congratulations. And at first it took me by surprise, but then I realized this is worthy of congratulations. This is a historic capital program. And when we think 5 years ago, when the draft capital program was released for our existing capital program, we were told that it was a bloated capital program and that it needed to be scaled back, and in fact it was. So to be where we are at this moment is in fact monumental. It is in fact historic. And the fact that it nearly, the New York City transit portion nearly overlaps identically with Fast Forward is a tremendous testament to the work of President Byford and his team in making the case in every borough at all these community and town hall meetings why we needed this level of investment in New York City Transit in particular. And I remember he would say things like, we can't be daunted by the sticker shock of this program. And all of that conversation and all of that groundwork, not just by you, President Byford, but by the team at large and by leadership and others who were back and forth with the city council and the state legislature, building support for this moment and this plan is historic and again, worthy of congratulations. There's a lot that this program offers. It's wonderful to finally see, after so many years of my advocacy and coupled with the advocacy of so many organizations in this region asking for a true plan that reflects, or better reflects, the capital needs of our system, this is a moment to be celebrated. There are certainly some things that I would have liked to have seen, particularly from Metro North. My colleague spoke on the $1 billion discrepancy, and the value and importance of that is we have a railroad in Metro North that we don't want to see backslide. I talked very briefly on Monday about some of our state of good repair backlogs. We're at 35% backlog of state of good repair needs. 450 miles of track are antiquated and are responsible for 40% of defects in the Metro North system. That's significant, and we need to start chipping away at that backlog. We need a third track too, much like I've advocated for more than a decade for third track between Floral Park and Hicksville in Long Island. We need that expansion of service on the Harlem line in Westchester County too, so that we can continue to provide service to our customers shed, not just in the Metro North service territory, but also those New York City transit riders who are using our system to commute into White Plains and further beyond other areas on the Harlem line. We need our substations in Metro North. We've gotten some, but we would love to see a few more. We need new rolling stock. We need the second phase of security and customer service information displays for the system throughout. With regard to New York City's support, I was very encouraged, Chairman Ford, to hear you reference or address one of the three asks that Mayor de Blasio put forth, and that was he asked for the forensic audit to be expedited so that it could inform the capital program review process. Many of you know that was an ask included and shared this morning, and I was pleased to hear you reference that and acknowledge the need for that expedition to happen, and I appreciate that. New York City has always been clear that we need to understand more the details of this plan, and the mayor has made it very clear in his letter to the chairman that the city's contribution should not be front-loaded. We need to see some of these other revenues come forth first. I do have some concerns about this capital program, particularly around the aid from our federal partners in this very difficult climate. But secondly, some of the concerns around debt. But most importantly, while we have this unprecedented capital program, we also are facing every year unprecedented operating deficits that are going to get worse. And as my colleague Andrew Alpert pointed out, we need new revenue sources on the operating side too. And that's a very difficult ask at this time when we've just received $25 billion in new revenue sources on the capital side. And I want to close by saying that the transparency of this plan has been not an improvement at all. And in fact, I'm quite disappointed that once again, many of us are including in our remarks how opaque this process has been. It has been a constant refrain over at least the 4 years that I've been on this board about needing to do better in terms of releasing information, particularly this capital program. In fact, when I first joined the board, we had a capital program amendment that we needed to vote on, and there was a robust discussion about not having received the materials in advance. And we're back to that same playbook. And so much of this funding for this capital program was contingent on reform and contingent on a change in practice. And I am not saying that. I think we're just slapping this transformation label and reorganization label onto, unfortunately, a lot of the same old practices. And that gives me concern as we move forward. I think, again, the process for this and the development of this and the lack of communication with all of the funding partners and then the public at large is woefully inadequate. But with that, I am pleased to say that I support this plan.
Thank you. So before I call on Bob Lynn and then Neil Zuckerman, Jano, would you just talk, please, about the $1 billion disparity between the two commuter railroads and East Side Access, et cetera, please?
I think there's certainly been discussion. We've made the point, just for the board's consideration, that part of this is because we account for third track and East Side Access all on the Long Island Railroad side of the ledger. But if you stop and think about it, the East Side Access, third track, and Penn Access are together creating additional slots for the whole system in Penn Station and in Grand Central. And that's and the benefit to Metro North is roughly 30% of those additional slots. So I don't know how much of East Side Access and third track and Penn Access, which together are roughly $15 billion, you would attribute to Metro North. But Metro North is receiving 30% of the benefit in terms of increased slots from that network of 3 mega projects. So that from the standpoint of our internal discussions about this, what the issue that Ms. Vanderpool has raised, I think that there was some view that Metro North is receiving a significant benefit from projects that are all being counted on the Long Island Railroad side of the ledger.
Thank you, Pat. I am going to be a little while. I guess I've been sitting near Neil too long for to learn about brevity.
Now I'm going to go longer because of that, Bob.
But I go first. There is clearly lots of extraordinarily important and good stuff in this capital plan. Signals, accessibility, buses, trains, power, and I have to say that I think on Monday when Andy Byford said he was ecstatic, couldn't possibly be against something that makes Andy Byford ecstatic. I want to sort of also recognize that I think it was, I think it's so important to hear the public comments at the beginning of the meeting. And I think the thing that was so extraordinary to me is not only is Andy Byford obviously a terrific manager, he seems to be a terrific listener. And I think that we all ought to be learned from that. Because what I think is missing, and I think I heard really basically Susan and everyone else say at the end of her presentation, that there is an incredibly hasty process that moves stuff forward at an incredible speed. And I want to say I applaud the intensity. We're all here because of the needs of the system, and the intensity is critical. But to first see an 11-page summary a week ago, to not see a full report until Thursday at 6 p.m. that is still light on specificity, though hundreds of pages long. And the city told a week ago that its ask is $3 billion. This is not a collaborative problem solving, a desire of getting input and getting to yes from all the stakeholders. And what I want to talk about, and I'm going to say that I also will support the plan. So I'm now not going to talk about the capital plan for a couple of minutes, because what I find so troubling is this is not a first occurrence. I've only been here 90 days, but I see over and over again, not a one-off capital plan, but over and over, examples of a problematic approach to process, of rushing, stampeding from issue to issue, resulting in hurried and not sufficiently thought out decision making. And I'm going to give 5 examples of that. And I'm going to start with a topic that has been just sort of wild in the upset, which is the overtime issue. And it all started in April 22nd when the Empire Center issued a report. And I'm going to come back to that report because I think it informs some other things as well. Right after the report, one board member said that people need to either go to jail, they need to be prosecuted, they need to collect money that they stole from the taxpaying public. And then the governor said, this is about stealing, this is about fraud, it's about people saying they work and are charging taxpayers when they didn't work. It's stealing, it's criminal. Now those comments, and as we heard from speaker after speaker this morning, that has had incredible significance and importance. I know that what then came of that was the decision to come up with an analysis that was presented in August. And one of the reasons I want to speak now is because I note that when it was presented in August, not a single city member appeared. I understand it was a special meeting, but I think it was too bad that the city had no representation at that August session. But I was informed by work that had been done by Alex Partners, where they, on their presentation of July 31st, actually made a chart where they showed the overtime. And they showed the overtime that first of all showed that New York City Transit of about $19,000 per capita is all actually about the same as bridge and tunnels. And while they were holding up bridge and tunnels as an example of terrific effort, it's almost the same overtime as transit. What was then, everyone often talks about the Long Island Railroad and issues of the Long Island Railroad. I assume people will talk about. But the thing that has hit me as the most significant was off to the right, off the chart on that, was the MTA police that had an average of $38,000 a year. Twice as much as city transit, at time almost 50% more than Long Island Railroad, 20% more than Long Island Railroad. And when I then saw the report that was presented by Morrison, they specifically said, we're not going to look at the police officers or headquarters because it's something different. When there was nothing more striking than a graph that said, boy, look at MTA police. Now that all becomes relevant again because of a decision of an issue of expanding by 500 police. And going back to the Empire report, I don't know whether anyone took a recent look at it, but it was suggested by Larry that we take a look at what was said before. The Empire report, if you look at their top 100 earners at the MTA police represent 1% of the workforce, 700 and some odd, 1.1%. They represent 12% of the top earners. So I'm not saying that anything is wrong. I'm not casting aspersions here. What I'm saying is a report that looks at overtime should be looking at it fairly, should be looking at the impact. When a suggestion is hire 500 police, which I might say, my estimate, and I think I've heard others confirm it, is it leads to at least $100 million annually in the operating budget. It's not a matter of 20, 25 million. That may be the first year wages only. But the all-in loaded cost of 500 police officers, and I'm assuming that the 500 police officers have to have supervisors, but I'm not assuming there are any more than 500. I'm assuming within the 500 you have supervisors. You have to put them somewhere. You have to train them. You're talking about annual costs of $100 million. Where have we talked about how that's going to be budgeted? How have we figured that out when we all talk about operating budget? And again, I'm not saying that it is wrong, that that's not the solution. But I think what I keep seeing is solutions announced first, and then you see whether the data supports it. And I'll give you an example on the fare evasion, which was the next topic that was plenty talked about. I said, before you figure out what your implementation plan is, You need to find out where the fare evasion is occurring. You need to know how much. And we had an interesting report last week that said, on Monday, that really said that when you add in Metro North and you add in Long Island Railroad, the cost of lost fares is over $300 million. It's fascinating that when you force a close look at that, almost half of that are from the buses. Not people jumping over turnstiles, but half are lost fares on buses. What can we do about that? We're in collective bargaining with the TWU and bus drivers. Maybe they have an idea. Maybe we should listen to what people have to say. A large quantity comes from people walking through the emergency gate. I think 40 some odd million come from that. What are we doing about that? Is that the need for 500 cops, or is it a different plan? If you take a look at the revenue loss, which I asked to be produced, the 10 major bus lines, the 10 of the most significant bus lines in terms of revenue loss, if we could deal with them, that's $43 million from 10 of them. If you look at the 10 stations that have the greatest revenue loss, it's only $8 million. So I believe that you've got to inform your judgment based on data, and I don't see a lot of it. And I see it happening afterwards. I see people announcing a crackdown on overtime without knowing where it is, and I pointed out on Monday, we know where overtime comes from. We may not know it instantaneously, but people have to get paid by putting in for overtime. So we can figure out where the overtime is. We can get that information together, and we ought to be working together as management and with labor to figure out how to solve this. And I want to then get to labor for a minute. And I'm not going to obviously talk about collective bargaining. And I know, having spent my whole life doing collective bargaining, that it is a long process with lots of activity. There was an old labor leader, Jack Beagle, who used to call it a kabuki dance that goes on. And I know that that process goes on. But I have this to say. It was shocking to me to read in the newspaper, and never having heard anything before that, of the potential of all the angst and unhappiness connecting to the bargaining. Now, I've been involved in lots of labor, so I know that people get upset and they make comments. But I had to go on the website of the TWU to see 7 single-space pages of proposals. And you heard this morning the intensity of the reaction to those. And it is such a conflict to hear the comments at the board every session that you make, Pat, that Andy makes, about how important labor is. And we all understand there's no way, if the 70,000 workers are not paddling in the same direction, there's no way we're going to do any of the things we're looking to do. But the process has to be a collaborative problem-solving process. And I'm concerned that the process that we keep talking about is not a listening process, but it's a telling process. I felt that as a board member for 90 days. And it's not surprising to me that so many people today felt that they were being talked to and lectured as opposed to contacted for what contributions they can make. Vinny has said over and over again, talk to the workers. It was said to me by a lot of sage, one incredibly sage labor person. He said, Bob, go and have a drink with a worker sometime, and you're amazed how much you can learn of how to fix things. We don't do that. You're not doing that with the board members. I don't know whether you're doing it with other constituent bodies, but I think it is critical that the board does that. So my report on 90 days is let's study and analyze first with intensity. Let's not come up with our solutions of how to solve things until we know what the real problem is. Let's not say, okay, the answer is 500 police officers, and then figure out whether the data supports that as the best way. Because it may involve bus drivers, it may involve outreach people, And unless you know exactly the problem you're seeking to solve, you're definitely not going to solve it with simply coming up with an across-the-board general PR presentation. Thank you.
Commissioner Zuckerman, Commissioner Herman, Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Rosa.
I will not use 13 minutes of airtime, I promise. I will. Yeah, 13. That's okay. That's your first. You borrowed some of my time. That's okay. I won't repeat many of the comments made so far related to the MTA being one system. I do subscribe to that philosophy. I do want to talk about Putnam County, which is who I represent on this board. The designers of the MTA, for whatever reason, decide that there would be representation from counties like Orange and Rockland and Dutchess and Putnam. And so I am here. While I do care deeply about the MTA as a system, Tom Prendergast, your predecessor's predecessor, and predecessor, I guess, after that, with Ferretti involved, was right. It is one system, and I'm happy, as I said, money to give up in Southeast for Spionk, and I'm happy to give up in Cold Spring for Cold Spring Harbor. I'm happy to do that, and that's fine. Thank you. You missed my speech on Monday. I encourage everyone to come to the joint Metro North Long Island Railroad Committee meeting for those quotable quotes. And I was happy to receive the report and read it as fast as I can. But I'll tell you, one of my favorite movies as a kid growing up was The Right Stuff. And when they were talking about the space program, I think it was Lyndon Johnson character was quoted saying, "No Bucks, no Buck Rogers." And when I looked at the plan, there was no cash and no commute for Putnam County. And the good news of it is the management, my fellow board members, the elected officials representing Putnam, and my county executive and our legislature all rallied to say, you know what, that's not the way it should work. It's got to work such that a rising tide does lift all boats. And I want to thank the chair. I want to thank Larry. I want to thank many of my fellow board members. Everyone I spoke with was I think, thoughtful and a thirsty ear for what was not a fair or at least necessary process. And the pieces we asked for from Putnam, whether for years or months, were modest. I think we were reasonable in our asks. I don't think we were asking for the moon, and certainly not in this plan. But I think we reached a place, whether that be for fixing Southeast with an additional overpass, replacing the Garrison Station, renewing it, fixing water damage in Cold Spring, a safety study in Brewster, and 3 major longer-term projects that we will study: Hudson Line access to Penn Station, which may benefit Jano from the slots over time, electrification of the Hudson from Croton onto Poughkeepsie for multiple reasons, environmental and economic, among others, and finally continue to look at how when we do the work at Grand Central, we can actually increase the throughput and the speed of trains, because we'll spend 25 minutes getting from Grand Central up to Spuyten Duyvil, which is not an easy part of the commute. I thank you for those supporting items. 2 last remarks, though, related to that. One is, let's get the work done, because as the Reinvent Albany people are trying to suggest, just because it's in the plan doesn't mean we get it done. So we got to get the work done, and I want to get it done in the plan's time frame. I will tell you that we had money for Prospect Hill Bridge in Southeast in, I think, 2 plans ago. We just finished it a year ago, after 8 years of being a closed road. And I'm saying that's obviously a bad example, not typical, but we've got to get the work done. And then the last thing I'd say is the reason why I'm hounding on some of these topics that are much more bold is for 2 reasons. One is the governor has been a true leader. How many different governors have we had where we've sat through this infrastructure with substandard sized plans, mediocre views? I was at Terminal B yesterday or Monday in LaGuardia. Just outstanding. Outstanding. And whether the Tappan Zee or the Mario Cuomo Bridge or the now additional span of the Kosciuszko, you feel like New York is moving. And I'll do anything to support those bold plans. And I'll tell you, with the new, effectively, term limits for this board, ladies and gentlemen, none of us are going to be here at the end of this capital plan. And the ideas I asked for, the 3 I mentioned at the end about the Hudson, well, maybe you will, Larry, but I'm not going to be here. So I'm not going to be here. My term ends in 2022. The things I'm talking about, if we don't ask for them now, especially for those areas that are underrepresented, if we don't ask for them now, As God is my witness, my successor from Putnam ain't going to ask for them. We've got to start on those things now because they take decades. I hope to God Al D'Amato gets invited to join us when we open up East Side Access in 2022, because this was started in, 1991, 92, this idea? So to do the things I'm talking about, we need decades of attention, and it's got to start now, and that's why I do it for not me, for my kids who are commuters and their kids. So thank you very much, sir. And I will vote yes.
Thank you. And as a new, relatively, I guess, new board member also, and first-time participant in this capital plan process, I have one basic true observation, and that the short turnaround time to review this 200-page document was problematic for me, and I'm sure for everyone. But I also understand that this is, for Metro North, a wonderful, historic plan, and it is giving us a lot of things that we need. And I also agree that we are one transit system, and that we should be striving to ensure that each of the components are as healthy as possible. So I want us to make the investment now to bring Metro North into the next century, similar to what we are doing for New York City Transit and Long Island Railroad. And in that vein, we would like to see for rolling stock that the capital plan definitely is going in that direction. It is providing funding to begin replacement of the M3s, which by replacing 80 cars. We feel the full 140 cars should be replaced under this capital plan, as the M3s are past their useful life. We also would like to see that third track, as my colleague Veronica Vanderpool spoke about. We understand that we need 3 substations, which would allow for the additional power needed for a third track on the Harlem line. Currently, the plan only includes construction on 2 new substations with a design for 3 more, but we feel all 5 are needed. We agree that Brewster Yard must be expanded now in order to accommodate the parking and maintenance for additional rolling stock. Under the customer service initiative that was a part of Metro North's Way Ahead plan, we believe that the fact that there's nothing in the current capital plan to continue that is a problem. We fully believe in the safety and security of our ridership, including myself, and we believe that the security cameras and the digital information displays at stations that were a part of the Way Ahead plan are something that we need to invest in. Accessibility and ADA, we still must continue to increase the accessibility for Metro North stations. Only 78% of Metro North stations will be ADA accessible by the end of this capital plan, and we think we could do better. These are the needs that Westchester sees for Metro North, and that we believe will improve the safety and security of our riders and improve our backlog in the area of the state of good repair. I was very happy to receive from the president of Metro North this morning, quick and dirty update on how the backlog in state of good repair would look after completion of some of the current projects in the capital plan. And I see that we are making progress, but we have a lot of progress to go, especially, Jano, as you talked about in the train shed and the Grand Central Station backlog. So all those things are important to us. We agree that we recognize that this proposed plan does make some inroads into state of good repair, but we want to keep that in everyone's mind that we need to do more. And I agree that this plan overall moves Metro North and the MTA forward, and I will support this plan.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Glucksman, Commissioner Mahica, Commissioner
Be very brief.
Tessitore.
Actually, I wasn't going to say anything, but Bob Lynn sort of triggered it. Again, I'm going to vote for the plan. I feel not only was the late delivery to us a disservice to the public and to us, it lost some of the momentum that might have been built. And I think when people got into this, and I heard Bob and Jano, you can get excited about it. And rather than holding it back, if we had really engaged the full board and the public as major advocates, it would make it much easier to get through this through the legislature, rather than holding it so tight. And I think it's one of the things that I'm very concerned about. There is a pattern here. If it's not trust that we're somehow going to undermine things, we hear about it, I think that's a disservice to all the board members I've met around this table. But it also gets into the problem that I think Bob and others have raised. The expense deficit in the near term and the midterm is going to require a new revenue source. And that gets me back to some of the knee-jerk things that have been done here. When I came here in 2016, I'm almost a broken record, to hear that we were engaged in fare evasion arrests of 30,000, 93% were black and Latino. Particularly when I have two people of color leading two houses of the legislature. I want to be able to go to core constituents in my communities and the communities I've worked with and get them not merely, yeah, we'll raise our hand, but to be excited by it. But then they hear that we're, in some cases, not people on this board, blaming basically young people jumping over turnstiles as the major reason that the system is at deficit in terms of expense. And then when you dig into it, has nothing to do with those guys. As a matter of fact, we know the buses and others. That's where we're losing money. But the perception is, here they go again. Who's the problem? These black and Latino young people are devastating the system. And in doing that, not only do you do a disservice to them, you make it very difficult for me to excite the constituency who's going to be necessary to get the next tranche of money to get this system into some kind of equilibrium on the expense side. So I urge you to use us more effectively. Look, I've talked to most of you here, and I really respect both the staff and the other board members here, but we have to be used more collegially so we can actually be the vanguard of some of the discussions going on in Albany and elsewhere. So I just say that I'll vote. I think it's got real vision, but we have to do better in terms of building a broader constituency for the MTA generally, and particularly in the city of New York among a broader constituency that is more reflective of what's going on the ground. For a guy like me, who has attitudes of mistreatment by the police growing up, it really stuck in my craw when I started to hear the statistics and the fact that it still persists to this day. And we're doing it again, and suddenly the tabloids pick it up, showing who do they show jumping over. We've got to get together here on some kind of uniform example, and we have to base it on facts, not sort of perceptions of where the problems are. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Glucksman.
Thank you. I fully support everything that Dr. Metzger said about the service, lack of service on the west of Hudson. She is right. She has 13. We used to have 19. It got dropped to 18, and now we're at 17 because of failures at NJ Transit. She also talked about service. It's almost an 8-hour gap between some of her service on her line, and we have two 2-hour gaps on the west in the middle of the day on Pascack Valley. I am not a Wall Street snob. I don't believe any of our fellow board members are, as we were accused of being at Monday. But $1 million is a lot of money, and this is true. But to put those passing sidings in is just a couple of million, and we need to get working with New Jersey Transit to do it, where we could improve service. Our county executive had a representative here today and talked about the inequities of west of Hudson, and we really need to get that addressed. Let me see what my glasses are. Yes, that's really it in a nutshell. We need to get some commitments that service can be improved on. In fact, that we don't have a representative on the board right now, as neither does Duchess. But I'm speaking for all Metro North commuters, and it's a good plan for the
of the lines that I represent in the other counties. And so I just hope that we can get something amended to add something for Pascack Valley, which has had nothing in this current capital plan. Thank you.
Commissioners Tessitore, Law, Feinberg, Schwartz, and Mack.
I'll be incredibly brief. First, I want to thank Commissioner Lynn on his insight and comments, well thought out, and it all made tremendous sense regarding labor. It's always very easy for the labor guy to say it's important to talk to the labor guys, you know. Coming out of my mouth, it really doesn't, you know, what else is the guy going to say? But at the same token, this plan, which we have got to get done, is going to get done by labor. And I think it's really important that this board starts to take a more active role as a group to assist and help and intervene in improving the relationship at this point. Tough times create a process, which we know isn't always a smooth process, but we can't have mornings like this morning without the key component of success for a program to come out and speak against us who need this program. So all I could say is I think we really need to take a step towards prioritizing the relationships at this point with labor and getting these deals done, which this plan is going to rely on tremendously, so we can all work together and cooperate to a great end game is where we're headed.
Thank you, Benny.
Just a couple of comments. First, contrary to some published reports the other day, there is no wedge between the Long Island Railroad and Metro North. And as I said to my colleagues yesterday, I'm very fond of my new friends and look forward to advocating and supporting their efforts to get additional projects that are important to their region into the plan in the future. And I say the word advocates because I'm a Suffolk County representative, and we are supposed to be advocates for our region. And I know they've been supportive of projects in the Nassau-Suffolk region, which I appreciate, and I will do the same. But our fiduciary duty is to the system, and that's why I will be voting yes for the plan. And at the committee the other day, Susan laughed, I liken the plan to sort of waking up on Christmas morning. You're really excited about getting some of the things you wanted, and there are a lot of things in this plan to be excited about, and sometimes that excitement is tempered by the things you didn't get or that you wanted. And like Metro North, there are some things in here that Long Island didn't get, and I look forward to working with Phil and his team and Pat and your team for projects furthering the electrification of the system out in eastern Long Island, whether it's to Patchogue, Yaphank, Riverhead, or Port Jefferson. But as Bob says, let's get the facts and the data first, so we could then be supportive and have the evidence as to why those projects are necessary. And I believe this plan is a living document, and we have the right to amend it in the future once those facts and data support that process. So I look forward to seeing this plan implemented, and I will be voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Commissioner.
Thanks. Everything has been said, but not everyone has said it, so I'll keep it to like 15 seconds. I think this is incredibly aggressive, thoughtful, strategic plan with major investments that we've needed for a long time. I'm fully supportive of it. I think particularly the investment in the accessibility projects is important, and I'm fully supportive of it. My larger concern, which we don't have a ton of time for now, perhaps we can have some time for later, is that we clearly have a problem on this board and in terms of how this board communicates with the public and the public communicates with us. So we don't have time to deal with it today. We've been here for a long time. I respect the public's interest in wanting to move on as well, but whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years of frustration with the MTA as the system has gotten worse, or whether it's distrust on behalf of the public that we are really committed to fixing things, you know, the anger that we heard this morning isn't all that new. We've seen this for months, but it felt worse today than it has in the past. It feels like it's escalating to me. It feels like the tensions on this board are escalating to me. Perhaps there will always be tension between labor and management, but it feels worse. Perhaps there will always be tension between, you know, what should we be prioritizing and spending, but it feels worse to me. You know, I and others are devoting enormous amounts of time, effort, heart, brain into trying to improve this system. I think everyone on this board is on the same team. I think the public wants us to improve service and the system. I think the MTA management and team and every employee here wants to improve the system. And so there's got to be a better way for us to work together. You know, I'm not going to tell someone that they shouldn't be frustrated about the amount of time they had to look over the capital plan, because it doesn't matter what I think about how much time you had to look over the capital plan. What matters is how you feel about how much time you had to look over the capital plan. So whether you had 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 months, if you feel like there has been a lack of transparency, we have to address it. You know, despite the number of times we've talked about how the main driver of the fare evasion problem is buses, clearly people are not hearing that. We've been talking about it for months. The main problem is buses. The data is out there. We've been sharing the data, but people aren't hearing it. So, and I'm not saying that's someone's fault. It just means we're not communicating it well. So, you know, we've been talking about 500 cops for weeks. We keep saying it's not just about fare evasion. It's about dealing with criminal activity in the system, because we've got to do more to make the system safer for everyone. But people aren't hearing it. I would be horrified, personally horrified, if what comes out of our increased investment in police and enforcing against fare evasion is a massive uptick in certain communities being targeted. That it would never be what I would want or what others would want. And if there is a perception out there that that could be an end result, we have to do better to communicate what we're trying to do here. So I think the capital plan is great. I think it's visionary. I think it's a massive investment in the stuff that we need to be investing on. We clearly need to do more to work as a board to talk and communicate with the public, and I'm happy to do whatever I can to address that and to lead it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner. Larry.
Okay, I just thought you asked. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to keep my comments brief as well. First, you know, I'm supporting the plan. I've said that at the Finance Committee meeting. I think it's a very good plan. And I want to, again, acknowledge the hard work, Pat, of you and all the presidents, as well as the leadership of the governor, because this plan, as good as it is, wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the leadership of this governor. He takes a lot of blame for things, but he's, in my opinion, doesn't get nearly as much credit for the turnaround over the last 2 years at his agency, because he created the subway action plan and got it funded, as well as took the lead on congestion pricing and other things. So you should get the credit when it's deserved, and he does deserve it. Look, this is a plan, as Commissioner Mahica pointed out. Life isn't static, life evolves, plans evolve. This plan will change on an ongoing basis because things in life change, things in this agency change. And as they do, we'll address them as a board. I completely support my colleagues on the board who raised areas where they like to see changed to meet the needs not only of the system, but of the regions that they represent. And I also truly believe that as a result of the outcome of the forensic audit, but also in my complete confidence in Jana Lieber, who I believe has done an amazing job since he joined this organization, that when we really begin to value engineer all these projects and sharpen our pencils, whether it's through bundling and design build and other things, that, you know, we're going to get really good numbers. And I hopefully believe that there'll be some extra money in the capital program to even go beyond what this plan does, whether it's state of good repair stuff or addressing growth needs or other projects that are important. And, you know, one of the things that I want to see on a going forward basis, and one of the things I've tried to do as chair of the Finance Committee, I really, in a perfect world, would like to change the name of the Finance Committee to the Performance-Based MTA Committee, because to me, and I believe it's this same theory, feelings of a lot of other of my colleagues here on the board, it's all about performance, how we perform for the ridership, how we perform for the taxpayers. And it's always money, 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 because a lot of times performance and money are one and the same. And we have to do everything we can to make sure that we spend the money that we have efficiently, wisely, and find savings wherever we can. And that's why I've kind of raised the issues of fare evasion and overtime so that we can determine whether or not problems exist, what the real problems are, and come up with solutions on how to address them, whatever they are. And I feel we've begun to move in that direction. And the last thing I would just like to say and ask is, I've tried to do this in other areas, so I'm being consistent. You know, I've made comment that in maybe every area, but in the vast majority of areas, from an operations standpoint, we need to CompStat everything, to be able to, as a board, monitor, track things in a real-time basis. And you know, one of the things I'd like to see happen, Mr. Chairman, working with Jano and the rest of the staff with this board, is to create a dashboard on this capital plan. We really need to have a map, a calendar of when each single project, when it's going to start, what starts, when it's supposed to be completed, who owns it within each agency, so we can track it as a board. We can monitor this thing, because in the past, fair or unfair, there's been a history that the MTA can't complete major capital projects on time or on budget. And this is a new board, and this has been a new day, and this is a new time. And while we're reforming and changing a lot of other things, we have to reform and change the history of being able to complete projects on budget, on time. And it's my goal that at least 95% of these new projects that are in this new plan going forward are all going to get completed on time and on budget. And I think one of the ways that we can hopefully achieve that goal is by creating this dashboard, and I'll work closely with the presidents and Jano and whatever resources we need to do that, is that on a month-to-month basis, whether it's the Finance Committee or any other committee, we can actually monitor and track and ask questions at the committee meetings on the status of each and every single project in this plan to ensure that these things do get done on time and on budget. I think the ridership should expect no less. I think the taxpaying public should expect no less. I know this board expects no less, and I know the agency presidents and leadership want no less. So again, thank you for the hard work that was put into developing this plan. I thank again the leadership of Governor Cuomo. I know the mayor will support the plan as well, and I appreciate that. I've known him a long time, and I know he's going to do the right thing for the city of New York and the state of New York. And again, I will be voting yes. Thank you.
Motion to approve. Terrific. So we've got 3 votes today to move forward. First is approval of the 2020 to 2024 capital program and 2 amendments. First, can I have a motion for board authorization for approval of the proposed MTA 2020 to 24 capital program, and to submit to the capital program review board portion of the capital program, which means excluding the bridge and tunnel piece, to the CPRB for its review and approval in accordance with Public Authorities Law Section 1269H. Motion? I move it. Second, Mr. Law, all in favor? Aye. Aye, passed. Thank you. Second is an amendment to the 2015-2019 capital program. That's the capital program we're currently operating in. This includes materials that are in your staff summaries in your books. This includes, among other things, accelerating 4 ADA stations to begin delivering on our commitment to accessibility starting now and the recognition and receipt of $529 million in New York State funds, not MTA funds, for the Elmont station at the Belmont Racetrack and the 33rd Street corridor in Penn Station. Additionally, this amendment includes a loan from the Penn Station Access Program in the 2015 to 2019 capital program to purchase 54 M9 growth cars for the Long Island Railroad for East Side access. However, and to address Dr. Metzger's question earlier meeting, these funds have been repaid by the Long Island Railroad for Penn Station access in the 2020 to 2024 capital program. So this action does not divert any dollar from the total project budget and available funds for Penn Station access. Do I have a motion to approve the proposed? You're going to abstain.
I'm going to recuse myself back from the vote.
Good, thank you. I was going to note it in a second, but do I have a motion to approve with that abstention the proposed MTA Capital Program amendment that increases the 2015 to 2019 capital program to $33.913 billion with some of the changes and the others set forth in the staff summary, and to authorize the MTA to submit to the Capital Program Review Board the portion of the amendment requiring its review and approval in accordance with Public Authorities Law, Section 1269B. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? All in yes.
Does that financial exchange between programs, that doesn't in any way delay the Penn Access Plan, right?
It does not. It's being made because the Penn Access program is not ready to spend it. There's no loss of a dollar on either side. And Jano, please confirm, it will have no impact on the timing of the project.
Thank you.
Good. All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain, okay. Terrific. Finally, do I have a motion to approve the proposed MTA capital program amendment that reduces the 2010 to 2014 capital program to $31.704 billion and authorize the MTA to submit to the Capital Program Review Board the portion of the amendment requiring its review and approval in accordance with the Public Authorities Law, Section 1269B. I move it. Second. All in favor? It's in the staff summary.
The way you just explained the previous plan, can you explain the previous plan?
Sure. So it's page 9 of the book. It reduces. Let's see. It reduces the 2010 to 14 capital program to $31.704 billion, and to authorize the MTA to submit the $28.917 billion capital program review board portion of it to the CPRB in accordance with 1269. The major changes are set forth there. For instance, Sandy funding is going to increase from this is a good thing, from $7.9 billion to slightly over $8 billion as a result of receipts of insurance payments that have to go through this capital plan because Superstorm Sandy occurred in this capital plan. Capital constructions program is reduced from 6.3 to 5.8 billion. That $500,468 million reduction includes 3 previously executed actions that are set forth on the bottom of page 9, and there are some other relatively modest puts and takes that are reflected on page 10.
Be a pain at all.
Okay.
I'm just sorry. Can you, once you turn yours off, Ada? There's a little feet. Thank you. I'm just trying to understand. Are we submitting this to date because it has to be submitted concurrent with the 2020, or would we have submitted these changes?
We would have done this independently.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, with the exception, for instance, of the 2015 to 19, with the acceleration of those stations, obviously that was influenced by the commitment to accessibility in the new capital plan, but the others would have been done at this board meeting or another.
And are we required anytime we have these kind of changes to then go back to the CPR? Like what? Again, I'm sorry. I'm just.
No,
this
it's okay.
Is there some threshold? Like what are we?
Yeah, it's a 10% threshold. It's 10% of what are called elements. So elements are sub pieces, and I'm sure that in your tenure on the board, this is probably not the First Amendment, but I could be. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, we would have done these for the most part. Again, the acceleration of the 488 stations was obviously influenced by the incredible commitment to accessibility. Don Spiro, is there anything you'd add? Thank you. Motion second. All in favor? Aye. Abstentions or noes? Thank you.